So reading is the ultimate cheat code and most people don't even realise it. So whilst everyone and the dogs are scrolling on social media gagging for the next dopamine hit, the top CEOs and founders are smashing their way through 50 to 60 books a year. This has to be one of the main reasons why they're staying ahead, and it's how you can too. So people like Warren Buffett spend around 80% of his day reading books. Naval Ravikant spends 2 to 3 hours reading books. Elon Musk basically taught himself rocket science through reading books. And that massive fucking hench guy called Hormozi buys 50 books a year, and has said books on influence and persuasion have had a massive impact on him building and scaling multiple businesses. Sadly, I used to think that I was learning by binge watching content. Then reading books changed everything for me. My decision making improved, my conversations got deeper, and my perspective on the world completely changed. And it was all because books gave me access to the world's greatest minds and their lifetime of experiences, going through decades of trial and error. To me, I think reading is one of the fastest ways you can level up your life. So in this video, I'm not only going to tell you why reading is so powerful, I'm going to be breaking down real stories of people who use books to leap ahead in life, the science of how reading activates neural pathways that scrolling just can't replicate, and the exact system I use to make every book stick so you can extract life-changing insights in just 20 minutes a day, even if you're busy. Let's get into it. So a few years ago, I was going through a difficult period in my business, and a friend of mine realized, I was mentally going through the trenches. So he actually recommended me a book that would, completely change the way I saw this difficult period. And the book that he gave me was called Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. This book is about Phil Knight and his journey of creating Knight, going through all of his trials and tribulations. So I brought the physical book along with the audiobook because my brain is just way too busy to sit down and read. I polished the book in about 2 days. So basically within 48 hours, I experienced 20 years of his life. The late night warehouse struggles, the near bankruptcies, and the courtroom battles. I experienced every single moment he nearly gave up, and exactly why and how he managed to persist through them difficult periods. Now obviously trying to grow a shitty phone repair shop isn't the same scale of Phil Knight trying to grow Nike, but I learned a lot about what it takes for a business to succeed and what an ambitious business looks like from the inside. And that changed the perspective I had on business forever, and it made me realize things that I'd never even think about. And also one of the biggest things I've learned was when I finished that book, I realized that books compress time. I mean, it may sound stupid, but for me, reading is a form of time travel. I spent a whole weekend with that book, and I downloaded decades of someone else's hard-earned wisdom, knowledge, and insights. So I didn't just read the story, I actually lived it. And another thing I learned was you have to persist through repeated rejection if you obsessively believe in what you're doing. So with that mindset, that later helped us get a chance to set up a repair desk in like a massive enterprise building, after being turned down multiple times. And this obviously led to more clients down the line and do more business. And I think being exposed to this way of thinking at such a young age made me so much more resilient. And if you look at the impact of what Nike has on society today, is just crazy. And when you're reading the book, you're taking all of his setbacks, all of his sporadic behavior, all his acknowledgements, and it makes you kind of realize that all the rejection, all the setbacks will be worth it in the end, depending on how you look at them. Instead of subconsciously, repeating the same mistakes over and over again, you can read a book, inherit their wisdom, borrow their hindsight from their previous lessons, and transform it into your foresight to stay away from the same detrimental mistakes that they made previously. And essentially, you're piggybacking off their success. But what's really fascinating is this isn't just some motivational idea and some rah-rah speech. There's actual science on why reading has such a powerful effect on us. So let's go a bit deeper. Okay, so when you read, your brain activates mirror neurons, and this is the type of brain cell that activates when you, perform an action or when you observe someone else performing the same action. So if you ever watched a film or a show or even played a game where someone does some sort of skydiving or they jump off a cliff or something that makes your stomach drop, even when you're just sitting on your ass doing absolutely nothing. So that is your motor neurons firing. So your brain is reacting as if you're the one, doing that certain action. And the same thing happens when we read certain books. When you dive into someone else's story, your brain doesn't just understand it logically, it kind of feels it. It mirrors the experience like you're living alongside them. And that's why a powerful memoir can hit harder than a motivational video. You're not just learning, you're experiencing, and that's what helps it stick. But it goes beyond inspiration and insight, because reading doesn't just teach you what's possible. When used right, it actually gives you an advantage over the experience itself. And that's what I want to show you next. Okay, so we've all heard that experience is the best teacher, but let's be real. If I can find a way to shortcut the learning, I'm doing it. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You can spend years failing, guessing, and burning out, or you can read a story of someone else's journey and tips and tricks and basically just shortcut the whole learning curve. I think now that's the difference between the grind culture and smart leverage. Like, most people spend years trying to figure it out from scratch, but the smartest creators, entrepreneurs, and builders, they start where someone else has finished. And that to me is just beautiful leverage. So Tim Ferriss, the GOAT, credited Vagabonding by Ralph Potts as one of the most influential books in his life in the Tim Ferriss book club. So he describes how he took the book with him during an 18-month journey starting in 2004. So he noted that the lessons from Vagabonding significantly shaped his perspective and were foundational in the development of his own book, The 4-Hour Workweek. Now, we all know the 4-Hour Workweek. It's literally like the Bible for the new entrepreneur, you know, being able to grow and scale online businesses and travel around the world at the same time. And all of that came from a single mindset shift that turned into a global movement. Oprah credits, you know, the seat of the soul for, you know, reshaping how she approaches life and relationships. And we all know the impact that Oprah has on people. Sarah Blakely credits much of her success to the legendary book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You know, she read that at just 16 and it completely shifted how she saw the world. You know, the book taught her things about belief, focus, and action, that all of this can shape your reality. So the book inspired her so much that she wrote a life purpose statement. And this was a constant reminder for her to stay consistent, even when she faced rejection after rejection. You know, this mindset helped turn Spanx from a £5,000 idea into a $1 billion company. And these aren't outliers. To me, this is just a pattern. People who read with intention don't just learn faster, they leap ahead. So when I started reading, I made the same big mistake that everyone else does. I started reading them like I was trying to finish a race. I would rush through the books and just to say I finished them, I'd put them on my Instagram and then with some fucking shitty quote that I just would forget like 2 days later, to be honest. But obviously the truth is, if you're not applying what you read, you're leaving 90% of the value on the table, just like I did. And reading for results isn't about speed, it's about transformation. And it's about taking the ideas off the page and building them into your real life. So the system I use is read, reflect, and apply. So first, I list a couple of questions before reading the book. So in a way, I'm priming my mind to find specific information and I'm not just flipping through pages. So I'm actively looking for ideas, mindsets, and strategies that I can use and apply to my life. So secondly, I reflect immediately after each session or chapter. You know, I take notes on my Notion book template. You know, I'll definitely make a video about this in the future. But essentially, I don't just close the book and move on. I take a couple of minutes to ask myself, you know, what was the most powerful idea that I got from this chapter? How does it connect to my life right now? And questions like that to get the brain and the juices flowing. And thirdly, I apply. So I have an actions task list for every single book. And when I've finished it or I've just stopped reading it, I will add them actions to my to-do list and it goes into my productivity system. That sounds cool, doesn't it? Productivity system. So this is where I will review and schedule the tasks down the line. I will write literally one action step, even if it's a tiny one. Maybe it's a mindset shift, maybe it's a strategy I want to try, but the goal is to turn the knowledge into action. When you stack the small actions over time, the results are insane. You know, a single idea from a book can lead to a decision that has, you know, massive impacts on your business, your health, your relationships, and effectively your whole life. The real secret is you don't need hours and hours every single day. You know, I built a reading habit in just 20 minutes a day. The best thing I do is buy the physical book along with the audiobook, read and listen at the same time on a coffee break, on your commute to work, or if you're on public transport. Obviously you're not going to do it in your car unless it's a self-driving car, fair enough. You know, when you have a quiet moment before bed, like that's all it takes. 20 minutes a day, that's all it takes. But you know, most people are trapped in this passive learning. You know, they read, they forget, and they repeat. But if you shift into active learning, you know, if you treat a book like something you can conquer and move on, then you start to see the changes almost immediately. So now that you know that reading is the ultimate cheat code and you know you've seen how the right books used in the right way can change your life, here's the thing. So if you've ever struggled to actually remember what you read, you're not alone, you're not stupid, you're just reading the wrong way. So in this video here, I will show you how to finally read smarter, retain more, and unlock the full power of every single page. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you in there. Peace.